someone's going to be getting Mace in their face. Here's your look at the McFarlane Toys Mortal Kombat 11 Spawn with Mace. The legendary Spawn now finds himself stuck in the Mortal Kombat universe by mysterious circumstances. Standing in 7-inch scale, Spawn armed with a mace is featured in his default skin as seen in Mortal Kombat 11 and is designed with ultra articulation with up to 22 moving parts for full range of posing. Spawn is a character that certainly likes his clubbing. Oh, he likes to dance? No, that's not quite the clubbing I had in mind. Before we get a closer look though at... No. Not that kind of clubbing. Before we get a closer look at Spawn with Mace, I'd like to thank the folks over at McFarlane Toys, who did provide the sample that we're about to have a look at in this video. This now marks the second Spawn we've looked at lately, with the first one being the Spawn that came included with his axe. We'll compare those in a second. Not getting ahead of ourselves, though, the figure taking the tape measure, clickety-click, right to the very top of his head. Spawn stands at around 6 3/4 of an inch tall, or he's roughly about 17 centimeters in height. For the sake of providing those ever-crucial figure comparisons, we can slide over the Spawn that we're about to have a look at and bring in the Spawn that we've already had a look at. Well, it may only just look like they're the exact same figure. You wouldn't be all that far wrong. It looks like they are exactly the same figure, with some notable paint tweaks that I have observed between the two. I'll talk more a little bit about that in a second. But other than just really changing out the weapon that he's wielding, they pretty much are the exact same figure we've already had a look at before. Though trading in his axe now for Mace, the figure comes though included with the exact same display stand that we've already had a look at before. A circular stand that has been used across the board with not only the Spawn releases but also the DC Multiverse too. Differently done here though is the Spawn printed in font, done here in white. It's a peg up the top that can be committed to either one of his feet. It doesn't have to be necessarily that one. If you feel more comfortable the idea of attaching him to that foot there, by all means do that. But yeah, it's the same stand as what we've gotten before. Nothing too different about these. At some point, as a side note, I would love to get myself a t-shirt. I never got the chance to get myself a Spawn t-shirt with just that font with the little skull in the middle of the A. Love that. I'm going to put that to the side. Then, of course, the biggest change done here with this release is the fact the figure comes included with a very interesting and dangerous-looking mace. You can tell it's Spawn's. This is Spawn's property, is the fact that there's a skull with glowing eyes up at the top. Spin this around just to remind you again, it's still Spawn's mace. Little glowing eyes up at the top there. This is a cool-looking mace. I would certainly love to own one of these in my own arsenal. Sorry, what? Oh, I'm not allowed to? I'm not... Oh, okay. Apparently I'm not allowed to carry such... Yeah, I figured as much. Not allowed to really have weapons like this in your household. Personal defense or not. It has all these sharp, not so much sharp, but it has what you would believe to be pretty impaling spikes on all the sides. You can see crisscross forms an X, and these are nicely painted and handled using a dark gunmetal gray. You can even see like the little riveted points on these. Very cool, very dangerous. Very, at least here, very illegal if you were to own a one-to-one version of this. I do like the way they've actually matched still the same colors as making up his costume. So you've got some burgundy wrapped in there, some black, burgundy again as well, and a little riveted point matching, little ringlet, matching the rest of the silver that they've already done to the top of the mace. Very dangerous, illegal mace. Just to show you the difference between the two, I couldn't help but compare these, because obviously there would be the difference between the two figures. The more harder, I believe, to find would be the one that has the axe. I still kind of lean more to the idea of displaying or collecting, if I had the chance to choose one, getting the Spawn that has the axe. It just seems more like a Spawn thing to do. Although maiming somebody with a mace is also something I could see Spawn doing too. Either one of these can be wielded in his hand, but for the purpose of the fact that this figure only comes included with the mace, just to show you what it looks like, you can take the fingers, pry them away from the palm. Not too much though, just enough to get the handle in there. This thumbsy. The thumbsy always gets in the way of things. We're just going to pry that. Ooh, I'm pricking myself while I'm doing this. The gauntlet that he has on his forearm that I'll talk more about in a second is very prickly. There we go. He got the mace in his hand. Now, technically, again, I made this mistake before. He can really wield the mace in both his hands if that's the direction you want to go as well. But we'll just take that out, put that to the side. not to prick myself any further, getting a closer look at Spawn's head sculpt, and obviously you guys will want to see, is it the exact same as the one we already had a look at? Yeah, I mean, for the most part it is. I mean, if you were to really look at that and somebody was to say there's 3 things different between this Spawn, this one, and this one here, would you be able to pinpoint all 3 of those things? I could, only because I've only had the chance to have a look at these figures, and I've had them in my collection now for several hours. At least this new one I've opened up. Been looking at this one, been comparing it over here. Now, all the things I'm about to say are changed between the two are only the things I can only base from just looking at these 2 figures. Your figure of Spawn, if you had the one that had the mace, may actually more closer resemble this one here. Again, like I said, the differences are only marginal, and I'll mention it just only on the ones that I'm looking at right here. The biggest one that I noticed, at least, is the cape is a different color. Now, spin this around to the back, and you may notice right away that the one that comes with the mace is notably a lot pinker in the cape, whereas this one is more closer to being almost a raspberry red. Again, if you already had this figure, it's maybe a chance that you could tell me down below if yours closer resembles to this cape, or if, again, it's closer to the pink that we're looking at on this one. Another thing I did notice that was different between the two is that the coloring on the white, sort of that M logo that he has on his chest, seems almost a little bit more whiter, a little more creamier in color. Another thing I also noticed between the 2 figures involves me having to put these guys up almost as if they're being held up here. Looking at the belts is also something I very much noticed a difference between the 2. The original Spawn that had the axe actually does have more of a darker, tarnished looking belt. Has actually a little more of a wash of brown added to it, where the one that has the mace seems actually a little bit closer to being silver. Basing it again only on my own observations and the 2 figures I have in front of me. Head sculpts seem pretty much identical. The only other thing if you were to say there's 4 things different between the 2, just bringing the arms down on both of them, the only other thing I could also probably mention too is that the eyes on the mace version of Spawn seem also a lighter color of green. Seems a little darker on this one here. So eyes, cape, M, and then also the skull, also the skull and chain belt seem to be the differences based at least on the 2 that I have in front of me. The differences I noticed between the 2 figures. That's it. Going to move this one out of the way. And of course, as we've already had a look really at this figure in the previous review, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about it, but obviously you guys will still want to see as much details and features on this figure as we possibly can. So I still like, going back to the thing I mentioned already, the positive points about the earlier looked at figure. I do like the airbrushed black that they've added around the eyes. In this case, with the lighter green, it certainly does make those eyes pop out a lot more. The cape is nicely done here in the softer plastic. The cape also worked the same way as the other one that we also looked at before. It's plugged into the back. Not only can you see it's been printed by the factory on the inside of the cape, I like that they actually did conceal that, but you can also see too the way it's rooted into the back of his torso, so you cannot remove the cape. You could pry this technically off the peg, but I can see there's a shinier point where there's obviously that's been some sort of adhesive, some sort of glue has been added down there just to make sure that you can't take the cape off completely. And again, why would you really want to anyways? You got the nice little detailing done to the skulls here into the top. I mean, again, the fact that this actually is closer to the coloring of what they got the original Spawn seems a little off, a little bit different than the actual silver that we get down below here on this glorious looking skull belt, with the softer plastic being utilized for the chains that wrap around his body and connect to the other side of the straight. There's the other skull there on the back of his behind. Not that we really want to spend a lot of time talking about Spawn's behind, but the behind is a bit of a reminder too, the amount of texturing that they've actually added to the suit. It's not only just on Spawn's derriere, but it's also all across the front of his, or back of his chest, and also on the front there as well. Now he does have these spikes. That's still not something that's going to be changed at all. Every single time I seem to be moving this figure around, I kind of have to pull back a little bit, realizing I haven't drawn blood, but it certainly is a more pricklier experience when you're trying to move the figure around. And again, we'll talk more about the articulation in a second. Spawn now is very asymmetrical. He doesn't match on both sides. He has the bigger gauntlet on the one side, a slightly smaller variation of that broken up by several bands on the other. And while he does have a smaller series of bands on this side, he's got a bigger, bulkier boot on this side here. I kind of like that. I kind of did like when they did switch out and give him this big giant boot. I could imagine it would make more running, a bit more of a difficult time for Spawn. I kind of like the idea that he's got this big clunky boot on the one side. And that's been nicely sculpted too. Still lots of prickly spikes making up the majority of it. For the articulation here in Spawn, it's going to be the exact same as the one that we already had a look at. The head is on a ball joint, so it can rotate all the way around. It only uses just the one ball joint. There's no secondary one at the base of his neck. The head does look down, though, so if you want a more brooding looking Spawn, you can do that. You can have the head rocking back and forth. Seemed more puzzled by the fact that anybody would really even be challenging him in a Mortal Kombat. And again, you can have the head looking up there as well. I kind of like the way that... Oh, that looks good. That looks good. Sorry, I'm getting lost in what I could think to be my my future thumbnail for this. First, shoulders. Let's talk a little bit about Spawn's shoulders. They do come out, and you can actually bring them further beyond the point of 90 degrees. There's also the little socketed joint on the inside that actually just is there more to conceal the joint than anything else. There's the little track joint right there that allows the arms to move out. You can also take the arms and rotate them all the way around. Just make sure that you come back home when you're ready. There's the joint once again. He does have a swivel at the bicep. The figure does have and possess a double hinge on the elbow, and the hand also does rotate all the way around. Why do I always choose to decide to rotate his hand on the more concealed, clunkier looking gauntlet? I should have really always go back to here to change and move the arms. Anyway, the hands do rotate all the way around. You can rotate them and hinge them also back and forth. Like the Spawn we already looked at before, the figure has an upper torso ball joint, and a little harder to make out, he actually does have a lower torso ball joint just behind his waist and skulls. The figure does have splits on his legs. I don't know why I'm always drawing everyone's attention to the inside crotch of these figures, but he does actually have a little ratcheted joint on the inside. Can you hear that? You can hear that a lot better if I stop talking, right? Yeah, thought so. Does have a ratcheted joint, so you can move those in and out. Makes for nice tight joints on these legs. Guarantees that they're not going to get loose over time. You move the legs back and forth this way. Nice, slight swivel at the top of the thigh. Figure does have a double hinge on the knee. Ow, ow. And then, of course, when it comes to his feet. Not only can they move back and forth this way, but you can also move them, tilt them back and forth. And the figure also has, in both the cases, a little toe articulation there as well. A little bit of toe articulation. Again, I just want to fully stress here in this review, the purpose of looking at this figure was more so just to point out the fact he does have a slightly varied gauntlet weapon for, of course, maiming his opponents. That's the only thing that's really different between the figures, and then all the things I mentioned are kind of just, again, if you were to tell me what's the difference between these two figures, I'm just going to bring his feet over. There we go. If you were to tell me what's the difference between these two figures, and I had to quickly come up with ideas, I mean, looking at it again, it seems like his cape is a little bit different. It seems like his eyes are a little bit brighter. Why am I not getting this? Let's bring that foot back around. There we go. Did I get that? I hope so. There we go. Whoosh. Yeah. As I said, though, even though it's really using the same mold, the biggest reason for why most people would be going out to pick up these figures is to get the alternate accessories that they come included with. It's very unlikely that you're going to be opening up all these Spawns and simply just displaying them on your shelf with the various different weapons they comes packed included with. Most of the completionists out there, and that's really where I think this line does its best, is with the completionist collectors out there that want to get every incarnation of Spawn, whether it's reusing the same mold and the same paints, but just so that they can say that on their pegged wall is both the one that comes included with the mace and the one that comes included with the axe. If you were to look at them just from a cosmetic standpoint, there really isn't a lot that's different between the two. I mean, even if just to look at these right now, you could probably start kind of looking at them, identifying some of the things that you think are different from one to the other. If I was just to, again, look at these and the time that I spent with them, I would say like the cape is different, the eyes seem a little bit brighter, and it also seems like his belt is a different silver than the one we got before. But again, mileage may also vary for these molds too. It's all depending on whoever was painting them at the time. Maybe that person at the time was just painting the cape a different color, or when it came off the assembly line, it was printed a little bit different, a lighter or darker shade than the one we got before. So maybe like there may be variations of those figures from one to the other. Again, like the biggest change between the two is just whether you prefer your figure to have an actual axe, or if you prefer to have the figure with a mace. I still prefer and lean, I think, more to the idea of Spawn being displayed with an axe. Axe seems like something that Spawn would be doing. But really, Spawn has had a lot of weapons in his years of maiming and brutalizing other people. It could make perfect sense for the figure also come include with the mace. And I gotta say, like, the mace looks pretty neat too. Just again, bring this back one last time to show you. Difference between the two figures again, axe, mace, just entirely up to you which direction you'd like to go. As Spawn steps up to the plate, we can get a closer look at the figure here in final looks. Just to also show you the proof is in the pudding, you can actually have the figure holding the mace with both of his hands, which actually gives you a very cool and very intimidating way of displaying the figure. Still, though, what you're essentially getting between this figure and the one that we looked at earlier that came wielding his axe is essentially the same mold. They haven't repainted this, not to the extreme of some of the other spawns that we will be looking at in upcoming reviews that match the off-colored skins that he also has in the Mortal Kombat 11 game. But if you're the traditionalist and you purist and you certainly like to get your hands on a more OG-looking spawn, then the one that comes included with the mace or the one that comes included with the axe is really your best bet. I feel as if there was also a spawn that was released with a sword. Correct me if I'm wrong down below. I don't know how far down the rabbit hole I would certainly like to travel, as some of the more classic-looking costume colors of Spawn here can make for a more expensive-looking figure if you're trying to track one down. I believe the most expensive of the lot that we've looked at so far is the one that comes included with his axe. The mace one is still hard to find and sold out of many online sites. So again, if you're interested to pick this one up for yourself, you may have to do a little bit of searching around and hopefully find one at a pretty decent price. Again, if you're interested to grab one for yourself. A big thank you once again to the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did take the time, did provide the sample of Spawn with mace in your face. We could have a look at in this review. What do you guys think of the figure? Let me know down below in the comments section, and perhaps as well, if I could throw the question out to you, had you had a chance to get any one of these spawns, which one did you end up getting? The one with his axe, the one with his mace, or perhaps another spawn that was wielding a different weapon? Let me know down below in the comments section. And if you enjoyed this video, why not hit it with a like? If you're loving the content that you're seeing, and certainly want to stick around for more Spawn, then definitely make sure you're hitting the subscribe button down below and turning on the bell notification. We will be also looking at, as promised, some more Spawn reviews coming your way, so make sure you're keeping your peepers peeled to this channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.